What happens when a 35-year-old African president decides he's had enough of being disrespected? What happens when Donald Trump picks a fight with the wrong man on the wrong continent? What happens when $80 million becomes the price of humiliation? This is the story of Ibrahim Traoré, the youngest president in the world. A man who went from army captain to national hero in less than 2 years. A leader who stared down French colonizers, kicked out American military bases, and told the world that Africa bows to no one. But Donald Trump didn't get the memo. On March 15, 2024, Trump made a mistake that would cost him everything. He called Ibrahim Traoré a nobody from nowhere during a rally in Ohio. He mocked Burkina Faso as a poverty-stricken wasteland. He laughed about Africa needing America's help to survive. Ibrahim heard every word. And he didn't just get angry. He got strategic. 48 hours later, Trump received a legal document that would haunt his nightmares. An $80 million defamation lawsuit filed in international court. But this wasn't just about money. This was about dignity. This was about respect. This was about teaching the most powerful man in America that some fights you can't win with Twitter rants and empty threats. And by the time it was over, Trump would learn why you never, ever underestimate a young lion who has nothing left to lose. Let's start from the beginning. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? Why did his name send shockwaves through the halls of power in Washington, Paris, and London? Why are world leaders terrified of a man who's younger than most of their children? September 30, 2022. Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou, erupts in chaos. The government has fallen. French colonial puppets are fleeing the country. The people are in the streets demanding change. And leading the charge is a 34-year-old army captain with fire in his eyes and revolution in his heart. Ibrahim Traoré wasn't born into power. He wasn't handed a presidency by rich parents or political connections. He earned it the hard way, through blood, sweat, and bullets. When terrorists were slaughtering innocent villagers, Ibrahim was on the front lines fighting them off. When corrupt politicians were stealing from the people, Ibrahim was exposing their crimes. When foreign powers were looting Africa's resources, Ibrahim was planning their eviction. In less than 24 hours, he overthrew the government, kicked out French forces, and declared Burkina Faso's complete independence from Western interference. At 34 years old, he became the youngest president in the world. And he was just getting started. Within 6 months, Ibrahim did what seemed impossible. He cut ties with France, the country that had been bleeding Africa dry for over 60 years. He told American military bases to pack up and leave. He partnered with Russia and China for better deals. He started paying government salaries in gold instead of foreign currency. But the move that shocked the world was when he stood in front of the United Nations and said, "Africa doesn't need your aid. We need you to stop stealing from us." The speech went viral. 50 million views in 48 hours. African leaders started calling him the new Thomas Sankara. Young Africans started wearing t-shirts with his face. The African Union invited him to speak at every major conference. But in Washington, they were furious. How dare this young African challenge American dominance? How dare he inspire other African leaders to follow his example? Something had to be done to put him back in his place. That's where Donald Trump comes in. March 15, 2024. Trump is holding a rally in Columbus, Ohio. The crowd is electric. The energy is high. Trump is in his element, feeding off the applause like a vampire feeds off blood. He's talking about foreign policy, about America's dominance around the world, about weak leaders who don't respect American power. And then someone in the crowd shouts, "What about that guy in Africa who kicked out our military?" Trump's face lights up. He's found his target for the evening. "Oh, you mean that nobody from nowhere?" Trump says, his voice dripping with contempt. "That kid playing president in some poverty-stricken wasteland called Burkina Faso?" The crowd laughs. Not polite chuckles. Real laughter. The kind that comes from watching someone get torn apart for entertainment. Trump feeds off the energy. His gestures get bigger. His voice gets louder. His cruelty gets sharper. This kid thinks he can challenge America? This nobody from a country nobody can pronounce thinks he can tell us where to put our military bases. More laughter. More applause. Let me tell you something about these African leaders. Trump continues. They come and go like the weather. Today they're revolutionaries. Tomorrow they're refugees begging for asylum in Paris. The crowd is eating it up. Some people are taking videos. Others are cheering like they're at a sports game. Trump is loving every second of it. This Ibrahim, whatever his name is, will be gone in 6 months. Mark my words. And when he comes crawling back, begging America for help, we'll remind him that actions have consequences. But Trump wasn't done. He was just getting warmed up. You know what the funniest part is? He said, that famous smirk spreading across his face. This kid thinks he's the new Nelson Mandela. But Mandela had dignity. Mandela had class. This guy is just another African dictator with delusions of grandeur. The applause was deafening. Trump basked in it like sunlight. He had no idea that his words were being live-streamed around the world. He had no idea that in a small office in Ouagadougou, a young president was watching every second with growing fury. Ibrahim Traoré doesn't lose his temper easily. He's a soldier. He's trained to stay calm under pressure. But watching Trump mock his country, his people, his dignity in front of thousands of cheering Americans broke something inside him. Not his spirit, his patience. The next morning, Ibrahim called an emergency meeting with his legal team. Not his usual advisors. International lawyers. The best money could buy. Experts in defamation law, international litigation, and diplomatic immunity. I want to sue him, Ibrahim said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were burning. I want to sue Donald Trump for every dollar he's worth. His lawyers tried to talk him out of it. Suing an American citizen, especially a former president, in international court was complicated. Expensive. Risky. There was no guarantee of success. But Ibrahim wasn't interested in guarantees. He was interested in justice. How much? He asked. Sir, how much should we sue him for? The lawyers looked at each other. They knew Ibrahim was serious. When he made up his mind about something, nothing could change it. Well, one of them said carefully, considering the damage to your reputation, the insult to your country, and the international humiliation, we could argue for $50 million. Ibrahim shook his head. Not enough. $60 million? Higher. $70 million? Higher. The room went silent. Everyone was staring at their young president like he'd lost his mind. $80 million, Ibrahim said finally. I want to sue Donald Trump for $80 million. And I want the whole world to watch him pay it. 3 days later, the lawsuit was filed. 847 pages of legal documentation. Testimony from world leaders. Evidence of psychological damage. Proof of reputational harm. And one very simple demand. $80 million in damages for defamation and international humiliation. The news broke at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. CNN was the first to report it. Then Fox News. Then every major network in America. By noon, it was trending worldwide. But the real shock came when people read the details. This wasn't some frivolous lawsuit filed by an attention-seeking politician. This was a meticulously crafted legal document that had real teeth, real evidence, real chances of success. The lawsuit cited international law, diplomatic protocols, and precedent from similar cases. It included testimony from African Union leaders, statements from heads of state, and evidence that Trump's words had damaged diplomatic relationships worth billions of dollars. But the most devastating part was the psychological evaluation. Ibrahim's legal team had hired expert psychiatrists to document the emotional damage caused by Trump's racist remarks. The report was damning. The defendant's words were specifically designed to demean and humiliate not just President Traoré personally, but his entire nation and, by extension, the African continent, the report read. This constitutes a clear case of defamation with racist undertones that has caused measurable psychological harm and damaged international relationships. Trump's team went into panic mode. They tried to dismiss the lawsuit as a publicity stunt. They argued that Trump's words were protected by free speech. They claimed diplomatic immunity. But there was one problem. The lawsuit wasn't filed in American courts. It was filed in the International Court of Justice in The Hague. And there, American immunity doesn't protect you from the consequences of your words. As news of the lawsuit spread, something unexpected happened. The African continent united like never before. Leaders from Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, and 40 other countries issued a joint statement supporting Ibrahim's legal action. For too long, African leaders have been mocked, dismissed, and humiliated by Western politicians who see us as inferior, the statement read. President Traoré's courage in standing up to this injustice represents the voice of 1.3 billion Africans who refuse to be disrespected any longer. The hashtag #AfricaStandsWithIbrahim started trending worldwide. Videos of Trump's racist remarks were being shared millions of times. African celebrities, athletes, and intellectuals were speaking out in support of the lawsuit. But the real pressure came from an unexpected source: American businesses. Major corporations with operations in Africa started panicking. They realized that Trump's words weren't just insulting Ibrahim personally. They were damaging America's relationship with an entire continent worth $3 trillion in GDP. Apple, Microsoft, Google, and dozens of other Fortune 500 companies had billions of dollars invested in African markets. They couldn't afford to have their business relationships destroyed by one man's racist rant. Within a week, Trump was getting phone calls from some of the most powerful CEOs in America. The message was clear: fix this now. But Trump being Trump, he doubled down. Instead of apologizing, he went on the attack. He called the lawsuit fake news, and Ibrahim a con artist trying to make money off America's success. Big mistake. The comments triggered another wave of outrage. This time, it wasn't just Africans who were angry. It was anyone with a functioning moral compass. The lawsuit gained international support from human rights organizations, diplomatic institutions, and legal experts who saw it as a precedent-setting case about accountability for public figures. 3 months into the legal battle, something shifted. Trump's lawyers weren't just defending their client anymore. They were trying to negotiate a settlement. Behind closed doors, they reached out to Ibrahim's team with an offer. Trump would issue a public apology and pay $20 million to African development charities. In exchange, the lawsuit would be dropped. Ibrahim's response was swift and brutal. No. The lawyers came back with $30 million. Then $40 million. Then $50 million. Every time, Ibrahim's answer was the same. He said $80 million. Ibrahim told his legal team. He called my country a wasteland. He mocked my people as nobodies. He disrespected an entire continent. $80 million is what dignity costs. Not a penny less. As the case moved toward trial, more details emerged about Trump's business dealings in Africa. His companies had tried and failed to establish operations in multiple African countries. He had been rejected by governments who saw his proposals as exploitative. The lawsuit revealed that Trump's attack on Ibrahim wasn't just random cruelty. It was revenge. Revenge against a continent that had refused to be exploited by his business empire. But the most damaging revelation came from a leaked phone call. In 2018, Trump had tried to establish a hotel chain in West Africa. When Burkina Faso's previous government rejected his proposal, Trump was recorded saying, "These people don't deserve nice things anyway. Let them stay in their mud huts." The recording was played in court. The judge, a respected international jurist from Brazil, listened in silence. When it was over, she looked at Trump's lawyers and said, "Does your client have anything to say about this?" Trump's lead attorney stood up slowly. "Your Honor, we would like to request a recess to discuss settlement options with our client." The recess lasted 6 hours. When court resumed, Trump's team had a new proposal. They would accept full responsibility for the defamation. They would issue a comprehensive public apology. And they would pay the full $80 million in damages. But there was one condition. Trump himself would have to appear in court and personally apologize to Ibrahim Traoré in front of the world's media. The day of the apology was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. The courtroom in The Hague was packed with journalists from every major news organization on earth. Outside, protesters from across Africa had gathered to witness this historic moment. Trump walked into that courtroom looking smaller than anyone had ever seen him. No red tie, no confident smirk, no defiant speeches. Just a man who had finally met his match. He stood in front of the judge and read a prepared statement. His voice was quiet, strained, like the words were being pulled out of him with pliers. I publicly apologize to President Ibrahim Traoré, the people of Burkina Faso, and the entire African continent for my inappropriate and disrespectful comments. My words were wrong, hurtful, and beneath the dignity of any public figure. I accept full responsibility for the damage I have caused and agree to pay $80 million in damages as determined by this court. But Ibrahim wasn't satisfied with just an apology. He had requested the right to make a statement of his own, and what he said next would be remembered for generations. "Mr. Trump," Ibrahim said, looking directly at the man who had mocked him months earlier, "you called me a nobody from nowhere. You said my country was a wasteland. You laughed at Africa's pain." His voice was calm, but every word hit like a hammer. "Today, this nobody from nowhere has taught you that respect cannot be bought, dignity cannot be traded, and justice cannot be silenced. You thought you could bully Africa because we are young, because we are still growing, because we don't have nuclear weapons or aircraft carriers." Ibrahim stood up, his presence filling the entire courtroom. "But what you forgot is that we have something more powerful than weapons. We have unity. We have pride. We have the courage to stand up to bullies, no matter how rich or powerful they think they are." The courtroom erupted in applause, not just from the African delegates, from everyone. Journalists were wiping tears from their eyes. Even some of Trump's own supporters were clapping. "This $80 million isn't just money," Ibrahim continued. "It's a message to every racist, every colonizer, every person who thinks they can disrespect Africa without consequences. The message is simple. Those days are over." He looked directly at Trump one last time. "You came for the wrong African, Mr. Trump, and now the whole world knows it." The $80 million was paid in full within 30 days. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was symbolic. For the first time in modern history, an African leader had successfully held a Western power figure accountable for racist attacks. The case set legal precedent for international defamation law. It inspired other developing nations to stand up to disrespectful treatment from powerful countries. And it made Ibrahim Traoré the most famous African leader of his generation. But most importantly, it sent a message that echoed from the halls of power in Washington to the villages of rural Africa. Respect is not optional. Dignity is not negotiable. And justice, real justice, is possible when people have the courage to fight for it. Trump never mentioned Ibrahim's name again. But every time he looked at his bank account, $80 million lighter than before, he was reminded of the day a young African president taught him that some fights you just can't win. And Ibrahim? He used every dollar of that $80 million to build schools, hospitals, and infrastructure in Burkina Faso. He turned Trump's insult into his country's investment. He transformed humiliation into hope. Today, when people ask Ibrahim about the lawsuit, he smiles and says, "Sometimes the best way to change the world is to make the right enemies pay the right price." The case is closed. The money is spent. But the lesson lives on. In a world where powerful people think they can say anything without consequences, Ibrahim Traoré proved that courage, strategy, and determination can make even the mightiest fall. And that's a victory worth $80 million of anyone's money. If the story inspired you, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of courage that change the world. Ring that bell because some victories deserve to be celebrated forever. Comment below with your thoughts on Ibrahim's incredible strategy. Let's show the world that when we stand together, nobody can silence our voices.